Welcome back to Prophetic Insights. Today we're continuing our presentation on the end-time conspiracies as related to the second coming of Jesus. We looked at the book of Revelation chapter 13, and there is a special warning against the worship of the beast and his image and against this dreaded number 666. That has become the theme of a lot of conversation and discussion, particularly most recently as it relates to end-time conspiracies or events associated with the government, the New World Order, etc. So we're going to look at some of those things that have been presented and see if they indeed have a foundation in the scriptures. Well, first of all, the warning in Revelation chapter 13 in terms of the mark of the beast and the number 666. How does that tie in when we look at other texts in Revelation chapter 17? Well, the Bible tells us that Babylon will sit upon the waters and will be able to control all nations and bring them together in a battle between truth and evil, an ultimate battle between Christ and Satan. In that battle, we know that there will be a warning that the people of God must receive. The world will be warned by the mighty angels of Revelation chapter 14 against worshiping the dragon, worshiping the beast, and worshiping the false prophet. Being reminded that there is a judgment that is going on to prepare to meet God in peace. And how is that to be done? But through the surrendering of one's life, one's sins, and being covered by the righteousness of Jesus Christ. So there are a lot of conspiracies, though, that people have presented as relating to end-time events. And they see things as being done by the Illumanti or by the global elite and essentially trying to control nations and to force people to be able to move along on this certain train of thought. We must, however, examine that to see, does it stand in the light of Scripture? Some of these theories, in fact, most of these theories can be traced back to the origin or the teachings of a book entitled The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This was the book that was the basis of a lot of the reasoning that Adolf Hitler had in choosing to exterminate the Jews, going after gypsies, going after those with disabilities, and even those who were homosexual. His basis was that there were global Zionists that were conspiring against the nations of earth. They had a master plan to try to bring the world together so that they could be the rulers. And all of these things he saw as different subplots of being able to try to bring tyranny in and to control the government. As such, they became persona non grata, viewed as enemies of the state, troublers of the people. Conspiracy was attached to them. And so many evangelicals, many persons today are doing the same thing, but instead of attaching it to the global elite or attaching it to global Zionists, there are other complications or other persons they ascribe these things to. Now, one thing with the book, The Protocol of the Elders of Zion, it was certainly shown to be a falsehood, a pure fabrication, a work of fiction. Notwithstanding that it has been shown to be such a number of times, there are people who still believe that this book has its merit, that this is a diabolical plot by those in the Illuminati or the global elite to take over. Now, depending upon who you talk to, some will switch it from the global elite to Bill Gates to the Rothschilds, the Bilderbergers, to the Jesuits, and so forth. It really depends on who you're talking to as to what end you'll get. One thing that those themes have in common, though, is that nothing happens by chance, nothing happens by accident. Everything is orchestrated by the powers that be to be able to try to bring the world down the road to global servitude, to bring everything together. Their idea is that there are Satanists, Luciferians, who are in control of world affairs, and that they are hell-bent on bringing the world together to worship at the knee of Baal, to worship and to bow before Lucifer. And therefore, any political leader, regardless of their affiliation, Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, etc., that they have all sold out to Satan. In fact, they believe that the only way that they'll be able to be in power, whether they are entertainers, whether they are superstars, politicians, business persons, media personalities, etc., that they have somehow sold themselves to the enemy. Now, the Bible tells us in the complete contrary fashion. It tells us that we're to pray for those that are in positions of authority. Romans chapter 12, Romans chapter 13, it talks to them of being ministers that have been ordained of God to help to hold back the works of darkness, and that they are terror to those that do evil. So you run a problem if you're saying that they are all hell-bent, that they are all pawns of Satan. Well, how is Satan then able to hold back and to keep in check those that are seeking to do wrong? Well, the Bible tells us in Romans that these ministers, in Romans chapter 13, that they are carrying out the working of God, that they are a terror to those that do evil. But again, some say, well, no, these are all set up for this purpose. Well, I will present to you various persons in the Bible. First, we think of Joseph. If it is true then that the only way that you get in power is that you are working for the devil, that you are working in the Illuminati, well, what do we make of the situation of Joseph, of how he rose in prominence? And there in Egypt, he became the prime minister. He was called upon to help to bring about a change so that the people of Egypt would not perish. And essentially, he saved the world from famine. Then we go to the days of Daniel in the book of Daniel from chapters 1 through chapter 6. And we see Daniel and the three Hebrews, particularly Daniel, rising to a high level of influence in not only the Babylonian government, but also the Medo-Persian government. And therein those various roles being used to help to bring about change, to be able to institute those things that are right, being looked upon as being lights standing in a dark world. Well, clearly, we understand that there is no such thing as a person that is in government, that the only way they could be there is if they have somehow sold themselves. That does not stand when you look at just basic logic, and you also look at the scriptural record, and you also look at history. So we must diminish the thought. And so there are numbers of magazines or billboards and things online that will try to show that there is a correlation or a link, such as you see here, between those that are in power. And so the main basis that they say is that all of these folks are a part of some secret society, some secret organization, and they're tied back in, and they have one plan and one plan alone. When we start entertaining, again, conspiracies of that grand nature, one would have to ask themselves how much of work is involved in trying to keep these things a secret. Many people who commit crimes, they're caught because they end up telling someone. For instance, if you wanted to rob a bank and you didn't want to do it by yourself, you would have to go in to recruit someone. So whether it's a best friend, whether it's a brother or a sister, aunt or an uncle, you would have to disclose those plans to someone. Now, if they agreed to your plans, then you're fine. But what if they talked to somebody else and shared those plans? Or what if they were not willing to go along with you? Now you've just given your plan to someone who in theory could report you or turn you in. So then you go to someone else. So you're taking a chance at whoever you talk to see if they will be willing to concur with you or if they are willing to tell on you. Now, of course, if you commit this crime and there's an investigation that is made, it stands to reason, usually what happens is that a person comes forth and says, hey, they raise their hand and they will say that Joe contacted me and asked me to participate in this crime, that Susan asked me to participate in this. Why don't you have that then? Why don't you have that when so many of these conspiracy theories abound? Where are the people to raise their hand to say, I was involved in this, I was recruited in this, and so forth? In addition, not only to conspiracy theories, but people also use various events that take place in the news and misunderstanding them, twist them to suit their application of how they view end-time events. Now, it's clear that the Bible tells us that we're certainly to be understanding and we're to be awake to see the signs of the time. But we understand Scripture, and as we see events take place, we see, are these events that are unfolding, do they relate to the events that have been foretold in the Bible? Rather, today, many people, instead of doing that, they see all events as somehow being a part of a great whole. That every event that transpires, that it must be a part of a piece of a puzzle that fits in. But that doesn't fly in light of Scripture. Matthew chapter 24 says there'll be wars and rumors of wars, earthquakes and pestilences in divers places. Jesus said that all these are just the beginning of sorrows, so that these would be things that would happen, unfortunately, with great frequency. But as they take place, that these events of themselves are reminders collectively in an accumulative manner of the end of time. Not necessarily one event as, well, this is the one. But people use that because it brings a great deal of hysteria. It excites people, and people are now become excited in terms of one event and so forth. In my few years upon the earth, I've seen a number of various events that have been used. And these events, as they are listed, they are often used in relation to end-time events. And so people talk of the soon coming of Christ, or they talk about the mark of the beast, and they say, well, it's going to be just a few months away, or it's going to be just a few years away, or the stage is set. It's about to take place right now. And these events are used catapulted in a way to be able to give the reasoning and the rationale that it is right there. It's literally just before our eyes, like one or two more things, and it will be tied together. And so you think of the Gulf War, of how that brought a number of people together to think, okay, well, this is it. This is a new world order that is taking place. Look at Columbine, Y2K. Y2K was to be the end of civilization as we knew it, that this was a part of a conspiracy to be able to control, to bring about chaos. Order out of confusion is the mantra that people use. 9/11. After September the 11th, there were a number of changes that took place. And those that push into a conspiracy, they will say in many of these that all the Jews that were associated, that they got a phone call not to show up at work. They were told, don't go in this day. The bombing of the Merrill building in Oklahoma City, they were told, don't show up for work. Now, again, if this is the case, that if people were being told these things, wouldn't someone raise their hand to say, I received a phone call? Wouldn't someone be able to look and to find out that a block of people were not involved? When we look at the terrorist attacks that took place at the Twin Towers, we know that there were a number of Jewish persons that were killed. In fact, roughly 10%, and by some estimates of those that were killed, were Jews. So this does not fly when you look at history, when you look at the facts. But to believe conspiracies, you don't have to look at facts. You simply have to make them up as you go along. And whatever you hear, you can just twist it and mold it and become very flexible. But this is different from truth. Truth goes by what can be verified, by what is actual, by what is permanent. Conspiracy, on the other hand, it just goes by whatever you think and whatever you feel. And so we go on. Some of you looked at the Great Recession in 2007 and 2008. Well, this is it. This is a part of the plot to be able to take over the world. The Pope coming to address Congress in the United Nations. Certainly, these are monumental events, and that this has never taken place in the history of the world. We understand the positions in terms of relation of separation of church and state and the impact therein. Many use these, though, to say, well, this is it. He is going to call about a change for a new currency to be able to implement and to bring things about. And so you had people excited, but excited off of nothing, unfortunately. Not excited about something that wasn't a word, but excited off of something that they perceived to be true, something that they perceived to be accurate off of misunderstanding. And then, of course, we can talk of COVID-19 and the plethora of ideas that are there. This is all a pandemic. This is all created by the government to control. The vaccines are being controlled to be able to test people, and these are all trial runs, is one of the popular expressions now, that this is just a miniature. This is a baby. This is like a junior version of it, so that when the real event takes place, none of these things, none of these fallacies hold in the book of Revelation. Revelation does not speak of a varied attempt, trial runs, miniatures, or anything of this nature. Revelation simply says that this will take place. It doesn't give a precursor or a setting up of things to happen before, but it says that this will inevitably take place. But people use these things. And the mass shootings, they use these things. They didn't say that these are false flags, that these are CIA operatives. This is a cover-up. This is all being done. Do you see what this does? It paints the government. It paints all persons that do not align with your belief as being the enemy. You now become the center of the conspiracy. In Revelation, the battle is between Christ and Satan. It is between truth and error. God is in the center of the issue, not you. In this view, you become the center, and everything is based off of fallacy and what you perceive, what is presented as such to be true. It is not based upon accuracy. It's not based upon something that can be verified, but it's all based upon speculation and innuendo. But as you go further in the myth of conspiracy, there are some things that are certainly grounded in reality that may even bring questions. We know that there are issues that we can look at and we can find historically. You think of the Tuskegee experiment, of how blacks were told that they were receiving treatment for syphilis, when in this experiment they were not. Penicillin could have cured them, but the testers, the scientists wanted to see what would happen if you did not treat it. We have other examples of the NSA and their mass surveillance. This was leaked by Edward Snowden. We know that big tobacco lied when they talked about the relation of cancer. And these are not things that can be swept under the rug. People do wrong things. Sometimes money makes people do wrong things. Greed can make people do wrong things. Pride can make people do wrong things. But one thing we know for sure that we have here is that we have the evidence to be able to back up the claim or to refute the claim as to what was being made. But then you move into an area that you start going into speculation. And so people start talking about UFOs in Area 51, that maybe that there are aliens out there that they're trying to communicate. And we understand from Scripture that that is not the case. Beings certainly on other planets, but aliens or beings trying to come here and that they are living in secret laboratories, no, that's not the case. Stuff of science fiction, which makes it interesting, but it is not the case. Then there is the idea of the Denver International Airport, that it's set up as a labyrinth to be able to convey information, to get people to NORAD and so forth. That the runways are set up as a swastika, that these are messages that you can't see if you don't have your eyes enlightened, but if you are enlightened, you'll understand and know. Then you move from that realm into denying reality, where people still say that Michael Jackson is alive, the Titanic never sank, that Tupac Shakur is still living, that people are being abducted by aliens and so forth and so on. You move from there into a deeper denial of reality, where you get into chemtrails, that Biden is a robot, the Iraqi dinar scam, vaccines have microchips in them, the pandemic and so forth. You're gradually progressing from leaving truth to denying history, denying science, denying these things that are substantive, and so you get into a world of make-believe and delusion and paranoia. The last piece where you are now more into the anti-Semitic point of no return and becoming detached from reality. Holocaust denials, belief in the Illumanti, QAnon, the deep state, the flat earth, the great replacement, and the list goes on and on and on. What do all these things have in common? They have in common that they're based off of conspiracy, they're based off of conjecture. Sadly enough, these things are being used in the church to try to show people that we are in the end of time. They're being used to be able to try to demonstrate that these are fulfillments of prophecy. And so they see these conspiracies, not as conspiracies, but as truth. Some of the teachers would suggest that by 2030 then, that the world will end, based off of scales that have been predicted by various scientists. And so 2030 becomes like a linchpin. It's a lightning rod to those that really get into it. They see the 2030 that this will be an apex in which the climate crisis will come to a head, which the economy in America will collapse. This is what they see, and this is what they teach, this is what they believe, based upon Matthew chapter 24, in which Jesus said there'll be wars and rumors of wars. And all these things in Matthew 24 they see is beginning in 2020, that they have a cumulative start in 2020, and this will all end in 2030. Now, if we say that, then we go into another danger. We're now going into time setting a time for the end, setting a time for the Lord to come. He said that no man knows the day or the hour. But we say, though we're smart enough, we figured it out. So you may not know when, but we know when because we were able to ascertain the day or the hour. These conspiracies have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. As early as the 1700s, the late 1700s and the 1800s, these things flourished in America. Freemasonry flourished in America. The idea of a one world government flourished in America. But we understand that this is not the case. There are dangers certainly in sharing these conspiracies and believing in them. The danger is that they detract from Jesus, the truth of his word. They also show a spirit of fear and anxiety. They generate this, that many who are involved, they're fearful. Everything, they're looking over their shoulder. They're living in a realm of paranoia. There's a general spirit of distrust, because who can you trust? What can you trust? I would say even with some who present the argument that these chemtrails that are appearing, and they're not chemtrails, it's just the exhaust, water vapor. But if these are chemtrails and this has been done, why isn't anyone dying? And why are those who are perpetrating this so inept at doing it? It would seem to me that there would be a different methodology that would be used. If COVID was created to be able to kill, then why not just let it run its course? Why not let it be like a bubonic plague that would kill hundreds of thousands, millions of people, decimating entire continents and cities? It doesn't make sense. These conspiracies ultimately damage our character and our witness. We become as the boy who cried wolf. You say things that cannot be founded based upon history, that cannot be validated independently, that cannot be verified. It just becomes a figment of one's imagination. Instead, the Bible tells us that when we're teaching, that we are to seek to uplift Jesus. Jesus said in John chapter 12 and verse 32 that if I be lifted up, then I will draw all men unto myself. And then Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 2, 1 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 2, that I am determined not to know anything among you save Jesus Christ and him crucified. If we allow our teaching to go back to the Bible, not off of the ideas and speculation, it will have a greater impact upon the hearts and the lives of all that are around us. And so I challenge you then to remember the Bible word. It says to prove all things, hold fast that which is good. Examine the teachings that we hear, compare them to the scriptures. If they don't line up with the scriptures, then let it go. If it lines up with the scripture, then hold it fast, and proclaim and uplift Jesus Christ. And so until then, the next time we're together, pray that God may continue to bless you and keep you.